Daniel Moore's alarm buzzed at exactly 6:30 a.m., just like it did every weekday. Without a second thought, he rolled over, tapped the snooze button, and stared at the ceiling. The same cracks in the plaster greeted him every morning, like faded stars in a sky that never changed. He sighed, not because he was tired, but because he already knew exactly how his day would unfold. His apartment was small, quiet, and spotless. A gray couch faced a black TV screen that hadn't been turned on in days. The only splash of color came from a faded poster on the wall, a sunset over a mountain in Nepal. He'd taken that photo on a solo backpacking trip nearly a decade ago, back when he still believed the world held something magical for him. Daniel worked in IT support at a mid-sized insurance firm. His job was secure, well-paying, and thoroughly uninspiring. Most of his day was spent resetting passwords and explaining to clients why their emails wouldn't send. His coworkers were polite, even friendly, but none were friends, not really. No one knew that Daniel had once dreamed of being a travel photographer. No one knew he had spent hours watching videos of remote places, imagining himself there with a camera around his neck. In college, photography had been his escape. He'd taken courses, studied lighting and composition, saved for a decent camera. But after graduation, reality set in. His father, a no-nonsense accountant, had insisted on something practical. His mother had nodded with tired agreement. "You're good with computers," she said. "Use that gift." So Daniel filed away his dream like an old photograph. Important but no longer useful. That Thursday morning was like every other, until lunch. He sat alone in the break room, scrolling mindlessly through social media. Suddenly, a notification popped up. 10 years ago today. A photo filled his screen. It was of him, standing barefoot on a rocky cliff in Iceland, wind whipping through his hair, camera slung around his neck. The caption read, "Chasing light and chasing life." He stared at it for a long time. His phone buzzed again. A new email. He opened it. Daniel blinked. The blog was still up? He hadn't posted in years. How had they even found it? His heart beat faster. This was ridiculous. He had a job, rent, responsibilities. He couldn't just fly off to Mongolia with strangers. And yet, he stared back at the screen, at the image of himself in Iceland. He remembered the thrill of that trip, the ache in his legs after hours of hiking, the joy of capturing a perfect shot. He remembered feeling alive. For the rest of the day, he couldn't focus. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright, the voices around him too dull, his inbox too full of things that didn't matter. That night, he walked home slowly, his hands in his pockets. The city around him hummed with life, but he felt like a ghost. The streets were familiar, but they felt like a cage. When he got back to his apartment, he opened the email again.
He didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, he pulled out the dusty camera case from under his bed. It still worked. He spent the next hour taking photos of random objects around his apartment, his coffee mug, the worn-out soles of his shoes, the old poster on his wall. The camera felt good in his hands, natural, like it belonged there. By midnight, he still hadn't made a decision, but he knew deep down that something had shifted. The next morning, Daniel woke up before his alarm. His mind was already racing, stuck between reason and restlessness. He made coffee but didn't drink it. Instead, he stared out the kitchen window, the mug warming his hands as the sun crept between the buildings. The email sat unread, as if opening it again would force a decision. He hadn't told anyone, not his parents, not his co-workers. Part of him feared they'd laugh, or worse, talk him out of it. At work, the rhythm of the day felt more suffocating than usual. During the team meeting, Daniel zoned out while his manager, a cheerful man named Rick, droned on about quarterly goals and process improvements. Daniel blinked and realized he hadn't heard a word. After the meeting, Rick called him over. "Everything okay, Daniel? You looked a little spaced out." Daniel hesitated. "Yeah, just didn't sleep well." Rick smiled, kind but distant. "Happens to the best of us. Maybe try some of that green tea my wife keeps pushing on me," he chuckled. "Anyway, keep doing what you're doing. You're one of our best problem solvers." That's the problem, Daniel thought. I'm too good at solving other people's problems and not my own. Later that evening, he finally told someone. Leah, his closest friend from college. They hadn't spoken in months, but she picked up immediately. "Mongolia?" she repeated, surprised. "That's insane."
Yeah, Daniel said, his voice tight, but maybe the good kind of insane? You've always talked about doing something like this. I know, but what if I go and nothing happens? What if I blow up my job and come back broke and lost? What if you don't go and always wonder, she said gently. That stayed with him. The next few days were a mental tug of war. Daniel made lists, reasons to go, reasons to stay. He consulted his savings account, reread the email, and even looked up flights. He researched Mongolia, vast grasslands, nomadic tribes, skies filled with stars. Still, the fear lingered. His parents called on Saturday. How's work? His dad asked. Same as always, Daniel replied. Well, at least it's steady. In this economy, stability's gold. Daniel almost said something about the expedition, about quitting, but he didn't. That night, he visited an old photo gallery downtown. It featured a solo exhibit from a world-traveling photographer. Daniel wandered through, eyes wide, images of the Sahara, Antarctica, crowded streets in Tokyo, all frozen moments alive with color and motion. Each photo screamed freedom.
As he stood before a giant print of the Mongolian steppe, his chest tightened. A man in his 60s stood nearby, also admiring it. You ever been? He asked Daniel. Daniel shook his head. No, but I might. The man smiled. You should. I didn't travel until I was 50. Biggest regret? Waiting that long. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. The deadline was tomorrow. He sat at his desk, the camera by his side, the cursor blinking in the reply field of the email. His fingers hovered. Could he do this? Give up safety for the unknown? He thought about the office, the blinking screens, the identical days. He thought about that boy in Iceland, barefoot, camera ready, fearless. And he thought about Leah's words, what if you don't go and always wonder? Slowly, he began to type, Hi, thank you for the opportunity. I'm in. He hovered over send for a long moment. His heart pounded. Then with one click, it was done. The decision had been made, and everything would change. 3 weeks later, Daniel stood in the middle of the Ulaanbaatar airport, his camera strapped around his neck, backpack slung over one shoulder. The air smelled different, cleaner, cooler. The language, the signs, the people, all foreign. But Daniel felt strangely calm, as if a piece of him had already lived here. The expedition group consisted of 5 people, 2 professional photographers, a documentary filmmaker, a translator, and Daniel. At first, he felt out of place, less experienced, unsure, the tech guy pretending to be an artist. But the others welcomed him warmly. They were wanderers, dreamers like him, chasing beauty across the world. Their journey took them across vast plains where wild horses ran free, to tiny villages untouched by modern life. Every day brought new light, new faces, new chances to capture the world's raw wonder. Daniel photographed everything: sunrises spilling gold over the hills, wrinkled hands of elders weaving cloth, children laughing beside fire-lit tents. But the weather was brutal. Temperatures dropped below freezing at night. One of his lenses cracked after a bumpy truck ride. Their food supply ran low after a delay in delivery. Once, he got lost during a solo hike and panicked until he saw a distant firelight that led him back. Despite it all, Daniel kept shooting. In a small village near the Altai Mountains, something unexpected happened. A local family invited the team to stay in their jur, a round, felt-covered home. The eldest son, a teenager named Batu, took an interest in Daniel's camera. Daniel let him try it, guiding his hands gently. Batu beamed with pride as he snapped a photo of his younger sister feeding goats. That moment, the boy's joy, the family's warmth, the mountains in the background, stirred something deep in Daniel. It reminded him why he had come, not just for landscapes, but for stories.
And then it happened. As the sun rose, golden light spilled across the valley. A herd of wild horses appeared, galloping between the hills, their manes streaming in the wind. Behind them, the family stood outside their jur, framed by smoke rising from the chimney. Daniel raised his camera. Click. The photo came effortlessly. one perfect frame that captured movement, stillness, and life. He stared at the preview on his screen, breathless. It was the best image he'd ever taken. Something inside him shifted. All the doubts, the fear, the guilt, they cracked and crumbled. In that moment, he knew. This was what he was meant to do. Later that day, the team gathered around his laptop. When they saw the photo, silence fell. Then the filmmaker, a sharp-eyed woman named Marin, said, "That's the one." "What do you mean?" Daniel asked. She looked at him. "That's the image that tells the story. It's going on the cover." And it did. A month later, after the team returned home, Marin published a piece online about their journey, complete with Daniel's photo as the main visual. The post exploded. Thousands of shares, comments, interview requests. A major magazine reached out, offering to feature Daniel's work in an upcoming issue. His inbox flooded. So did his heart. For the first time in years, Daniel felt proud, not for solving a tech issue or answering emails, but for showing the world something beautiful. His photo of the Mongolian sunrise didn't just go viral, it opened doors. And it was all because he'd clicked send. 6 months later, Daniel stood in a quiet art gallery in downtown Chicago. The walls were lined with prints from his Mongolian expedition. People drifted from photo to photo, murmuring praise, asking questions, reading the captions he had carefully written. Each image told a story. The elderly shepherd holding his grandchild, the endless skies over the steppe, the wild horses frozen in golden motion. In the center of the room was the photo. That photo. The one that had changed everything. Beneath it, a placard read, "Sunrise in Altai, Daniel Moore." He watched as a young woman stared at it for a long time, then turned to her friend and whispered, "It feels like it's moving." Daniel smiled softly. After the photo went viral, his life shifted faster than he'd imagined. Invitations rolled in. Exhibitions, collaborations, interviews. He was featured in a magazine he used to read on his commute. A travel brand offered to sponsor his next expedition. He'd returned to his apartment briefly after Mongolia, but it no longer felt like home. He packed up most of his belongings and moved out. But when the magazine arrived with Daniel's photo on the cover, they framed it and hung it in the living room. Leah came to the gallery that evening. She hugged him tightly and stepped back to take it all in. "You did it," she said, beaming. Daniel nodded. "I almost didn't." "But you did." They walked the exhibit together. Daniel told her stories about the people behind the photos, the places that almost broke him, and the ones that healed him. When they stopped again at the sunrise shot, Leah asked, "What would you have done if you didn't say yes to that email?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around the gallery, the warm lighting, the curious faces, the art that had once only existed in his mind. "I'd still be at that desk," he said quietly, still wondering what it would feel like to live. A few weeks later, Daniel received another message, this time from a nonprofit that brought art and photography education to underprivileged youth in remote areas. They wanted him to lead a workshop. The location? A small village in northern India. He said yes immediately. During the flight, he scrolled through his photos. Then he opened a folder labeled Before Mongolia, older shots he'd nearly deleted. Among them was the Iceland cliff photo, the one that had resurfaced all those months ago. He stared at it for a while. The image showed a young man searching for something, unsure of what he would find. Looking back, Daniel realized he wasn't just chasing sunsets. He was chasing a life that meant something, a version of himself brave enough to try. And now, he was living it. The flight attendant tapped his shoulder. "Sir, would you like a drink?" Daniel smiled. Just water, thanks." He looked out the window. The clouds below looked like soft hills, endless and open. Somewhere down there, someone else was sitting in a gray office, dreaming of something more. Maybe they'd see his photo. Maybe they'd make their decision.